Hi everybody, my name is Cindy Mojica. I am the chef instructor here at the Silver Fork program at the Center on Halstead. Today I'm going to talk to you, our first ever virtual advanced learning video about pasta. We're going to make fresh pasta today. Now, I want to do a quick little intro about fresh pasta versus dry pasta. Now, a lot of people believe dry pasta not as good as fresh pasta. Not the case. They're just very different. Okay, so in Italy, there are over 350 different shapes that dry pasta comes into. Now, the Italians would not have 350 different shapes if dry pasta wasn't as good as fresh. All right, so I want you to keep that in mind. The only difference is really that dry pasta has different ingredients, right? It doesn't have eggs. It's mostly durum wheat flour, which is a very tough kind of flour, which you want in a dry pasta. But generally speaking, you save those pastas for something that has maybe an oily texture for a sauce or something a little bit thinner, right? If you look at really good dry pasta, right, if you look at it before you cook it, you'll see it's got a little bit of a rough texture. And that little rough texture is really nice for holding on to kind of thinner sauces and things like that. Now, fresh pasta, in the other hand, which we're going to make, right? You do stuffed pastas, right? And those pastas also, if you just make like linguine or tagliatelle or pappardelle, you make those and you use kind of a creamier sauce, right? Your Alfredos, anything that's kind of heavy and yolky. So just keep that in mind. The only kind of real difference there, though, is that you want to use something like a bolognese, right? Or something that we consider meat sauce. Like a tomato sauce with meat in it, or a ragu. That you can use with dry or fresh. Either way you want to go with that, it is perfect, all right? So, I don't want you to think about fresh pasta being better than dry pasta. They just have different applications, all right? Today I'm going to show you how to make fresh pasta. All right, we're going to turn some of that into linguine. I'll show you a couple different shapes for stuffing some pastas, right? And I'll show you how to do a carbonara along with a brown butter sauce that we'll do, and I'll toss our filled pasta shapes into. All right, so come on over and I'll show you how to do it. Okay guys, so first things first. Here are our ingredients. I've got 8 ounces of AP flour, all purpose. I have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I have 6 egg yolks and 1 whole egg yolk. 1.5 teaspoons of extra virgin olive oil, and 1 tablespoon of water. The only other special equipment I have is a bench scraper and a whisk. And I'm going to do everything by hand for this first go, so no special equipment really is needed. All right, so let's get started mixing. Okay, so the first things first, I want to put my flour in a bowl. Now, traditionally you would do this right on the countertop, but I have found that it is very messy, and if you mess up, especially when you're first starting out, it gets crazy. So just start out in a bowl, it'll make your life a whole lot easier. All right, so I got my AP flour in here. I'm going to go ahead and with my salt. All right, and I'm just going to give this a quick whisk, just so it all comes together very nicely. All right, next thing I'm going to do, all right, is I'm going to make a small well right in the middle. Now, I don't want the flour, all right, I still want a little bit of flour towards the bottom here, but I just want a nice place where I'm going to put in my wet ingredients. So then, I'm going to take my eggs, and I'm going to whisk in my water and my olive oil. All right. And I'm just going to give this a quick whisk. All right, it doesn't have to be super well beaten, but I want those eggs broken up. Okay. And again, traditionally what you would do is you would crack these eggs right into the well that you just made in there, right, along with your wet ingredients. However, again, it gets very, very messy. So I recommend just grab a bowl, give it a quick whisk, and then go ahead and add in your wet. Okay, so we're just going to pour this wet stuff right in here. See what happened just there? All right, it gets all over the place. Okay. And I'm just going to take my hand. Again, I'm doing this all by hand. So I'm going to take this, just use my hand and scrape out all the egg. All right, I want that egg for sure. Okay. Cracked all of them. I definitely want all of them. All right, so now I'm just going to use my fingers. Again, traditionally you might use a fork. You're welcome to. I always do it by hand, and that's why I like doing it by hand. Okay, so I'm just going to take a little bit of this flour and start mixing it in with the wet. All right. Just start mixing, and don't worry, right? Don't overmix, just use the tip of your fingers to mix it all together, and just start bringing in some of that wet, right? Again, this is why I like doing it in a bowl to start out with, because I would not be able to do this neatly on a counter. Okay? You're welcome to try, but just be prepared that it might not go right. So now see how it's coming together? All right, I got crumbles, all right? So now that everything's kind of getting hydrated, I'm gonna push it all together, right? I'm gonna try and make a nice even mass. All right, it is going to get messy. It is gonna stick to your fingers. Don't you worry. All right. See how I'm kind of just moving around, pressing all these little crumbly bits. All right. Now, if you need more water, if you feel like it's not coming together, right, or it looks a little too dry, you are welcome to add a little bit more water. Okay? If it looks too wet, you can add a little bit more flour. It really depends on your egg yolks more than anything. And I'm just going to start kneading it now. All right, I'm going to pour this onto the table as well. I'm going to scrape off all this lovely stuff that got stuck in my fingers. All right. And put this bowl aside. I don't need it anymore. So now I'm just going to use the palm of my hand to kind of press into this, right, and start picking up some of these little crumbly bits. Okay. Now I know it looks a little dry. Don't worry. Again, if it was super, super crumbly and dry, I might add a little splash of water, maybe no more than a teaspoon. Okay? But in this case, I feel good about it. It's picking up all the pieces. I'm fine with it. Okay? But the next thing we're going to do after we get this nice and melded together, you want to do this for about a minute. All right? See how I'm just kind of making sure I get all these little pieces. And as you knead it, you're going to feel it get a little sticky. Right? That's okay. Right? Again, if your dough, when you first put it onto the counter, it's very, very sticky, you can throw a little bit of flour on the counter so that it doesn't stick. Right? Let's see now. You can see it start to stick to the counter a little bit. All right. Now I've got a nice, smooth looking dough. All right, that's nice and moist. That's what I want. Okay. So now I don't want to overwork it. I just want to make sure that I'm getting it all together. So what I'm going to do now is, okay, I'm going to make a nice little disc. Not a ball, but a disc. Right? I'm going to wrap this in plastic. And I'm going to let it rest in the refrigerator for at least an hour before I use it. So I'm going to wrap it up in the fridge 1 hour, and then I'll show you how to roll it. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to roll out this pasta. Right here I have a pasta rolling machine. Now, do you absolutely need a pasta rolling machine to make pasta? No, you can actually roll it out with a rolling pin. However, if you make pasta all the time, this thing is great. Okay, I have it, I'm going to use it. Now, what you want to know is, okay, these are the different parts. Here's the roller. All right, you clamp it to the table. All right, you've got, usually comes with a die of some kind, so you can do different size cut pasta. Again, if this, for some reason, maybe you go to a garage sale and you find one of these, it doesn't have this, don't worry, you can still do it by hand with a knife. Okay, we've got our crank here. All right, and the other thing I want you to be aware of, right, is that there is this knob that has numbers. Okay, we're going to be using this. You always want to start on the widest setting and then work your way to the narrowest, depending on what you're making. Now, you don't want to rush this part, otherwise your pasta comes out kind of weird and lumpy and gluey, all right? So you got to take the time to start at the widest setting and work your way to the narrowest. Okay, so I'm going to go grab our pasta and we'll start rolling. All right, so I've got our pasta from earlier. Now it's set for an hour. Now the reason you want to let it sit for an hour, okay, is that even though it looked nice and moist when we put it in the fridge, we want to make sure that it is actually fully hydrated, okay? It also gives it time for the proteins to relax. That way it won't be a very tough pasta. We want nice, tender, delicious pasta. All right, so we're going to go ahead and unwrap this. Now you can let it sit. You can even do this the day before you need to. Just know you might get a little bit of gray color. That's not a bad thing. All right, it will go away once you start rolling. But you definitely don't want to make it too far in advance, otherwise it gets a little oxidized. So I'm just going to put a little bit of flour down, or I'm about to put this dough, and right in front of where I'm going to roll it. Okay, just so it doesn't stick, because again, it's a little bit sticky. That's okay. That's kind of what we want, actually. Okay, I'm going to put this right here. I'm going to save that plastic that I just rolled it, and I'm going to cut it into quarters. All right, it makes it just a little easier to roll through. You can definitely not try and roll this through the machine all in one big lump. Okay, so I'm going to take this plastic. I'm just going to grab one of these quarters, and I'm just going to keep that right there. Okay, so depending on how quickly you work, right, you may not worry so much about this, but it's best to have it covered in plastic than not. All right, I'm going to take this, just roll it in a little bit of flour, and I'm going to shape this into kind of a square. More of a rectangle, actually. Just flatten it out a little bit. All right, I'm not kneading it. I'm just trying to shape it so it comes through the machine nice and neatly. Okay? Okay, so I've got it on the widest setting. Okay? Usually that's 1. It's easy to remember. You start at 1. Okay, and I'm going to roll it through. It's not going to look very pretty, guys. Yeah, that's okay, okay? When the first one you go through, all right, it's going to look a little rough. Don't worry, okay? I'm just going to fold it over itself. Okay, I'm going to tighten the machine because it wants to move around just a little bit. There we go. I'm going to roll through. I'm still on 1, okay? All right, and now what I'm seeing is it's going to start to smooth itself out. All right, this is also the time that you want to take your time to shape it as squarely as you want. All right, these little folds actually add to a nice layering effect, okay? Because we're not going to do much of that after we get through 1. So once it starts going through pretty easily, all right, with very little resistance, that's when we know we're ready to go down a size. All right, so this is nice and thick. So far, so good. That's what we want. Okay. So now I'm going to go down to the next one, which is 2. All right, so now at this point, right, once we've gotten 1, I rolled it through what? How many? 4 times? All right, we're just going to roll this through twice now. So once, twice. That second time it goes through, it's going to go through pretty easily. All right, we see it getting longer, right? All right, so now we're going to go from 2 down to 3. All right, that, see how it's going through really smooth now? Really easily. All right, just 2 through. Now we're going 4. Now it really depends on the machine how thin we're going to go. All right, some machines go really, really thin. Okay, it depends also on what you're making. But you see this pasta getting nice and long. All right, getting thinner and thinner. That's what we want. So I'm just going to go 1 more here. Again, every machine is a little bit different. This one goes pretty thin. Oh, yeah. Look at that. It also feels a lot drier now that it's been rolled out. Right, you can see how thin that is, which is great. Okay. Now let's talk about some cutting. All right. Now, I don't want to use this whole sheet. This should not be one big noodle. All right, so I'm definitely going to cut it down to kind of more normal sizes. All right. So some of the ways you can do that, okay? Pizza cutter is absolutely one of your best friends, all right? Pizza cutter. We also have these fun fluted. All right. These are fun because they make a nice little rippled edge. If you don't have any of those, just a knife is perfectly fine. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut these down into kind of shorter pieces, and then I'm going to attach our die cutter here onto the back of this, and then we're going to cut our, well, I'm going to make linguine. Maybe I'll make, linguine. I'll go with linguine. Right. They don't have to be perfectly the same size if you're trying to do the same size. All right, I'll just lay it on top of each other. All right, more or less get that, okay? The way you use this guy is you slide it on backside here. Oops, upside down. That would help. Okay. And then you use the same crank that you used before and just put it where you need it. And I'm just going to run this through the cutter. Now, I've got really pretty linguine. All right. So after it's been cut, I kind of don't want to handle it too much. So I've got this half sheet pan with semolina flour. Now, semolina is actually an Italian wheat flour, sometimes referred to as durum flour, which I mentioned earlier is what you use to make dry pasta. Now, I have it on here just so it doesn't have our pasta stick to the bottom. All right. And the beautiful thing about this, it's a little bit difficult to find. Usually you can find it in the Italian section of most grocery stores. But what it does is it helps it from sticking on here. And when we go to cook our pasta, the semolina just falls off of it, as opposed to flour, which can kind of cake onto it and you get kind of these weird gooey parts. So I've got this nice semolina flour. Again, if I was working fairly slowly and I wanted a little bit of, moisture to stay onto these, I put a damp towel over this. Otherwise, though, it's okay if it dries out a little bit because we're going to cook it fairly soon. Okay, so I'm going to do the other half of this, and then the other half of our pasta. I'm going to show you how to make some shapes. All right, so now I've cut half of my pasta dough into these nice little linguine bundles, and I'm just going to let them hang out. Let's talk about filled pasta. All right, so now what I've done is I've just rolled out the dough, just like I did before to make our linguine, but instead of running it through the cutter, I'm going to make different shapes now. Okay. So I want to work with one sheet. I'm going to trim off the ends because it just makes it a little easier figure stuff out. Okay, these guys, if you want to boil them off, you're welcome to. All right, I'm going to throw them on the pasta sheet there. If you don't, if you just want to throw it out, it's okay too. All right. So now what I've done is I made a ricotta filling while we were waiting for our pasta dough to rest and hydrate, and I put it into a pastry bag. If you don't have pastry bags, you can use a Ziploc bag and just cut the corner off of it. All right. If you don't have that, or you don't want to waste a Ziploc bag, just use a spoon. It totally works just fine. But especially if you're going to make a bunch, a pastry bag really, really helps out. So I'm going to cut the tip off of this. And you don't want it to be too small or too big. You'll figure it out. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to make some ravioli. Right, there's 100 different ways you can shape this pasta. I'm just going to show you 2 to keep it nice and easy. The other thing I have going on here is an egg wash. All right. What is an egg wash, you say? It's a fancy way of saying a whipped egg or beaten egg. Okay, I put a little splash of water in here just so it makes it a little bit thinner, but basically just a really well beaten egg. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half. Take this pasta sheet, right? Just so they're about the same all together. All right. Watch that corner. There we go. Okay. Again, I'm just going to save that little bit of scrap. So next thing I'm going to do. Now, you can make your shape, size, whichever what you like, okay? Just try and be as consistent as you possibly can. Now, I'm going to take my filling, and I want to make sure I have a good amount of space all the way around. Okay? I don't want these too big. I kind of like smaller ravioli. That way I can have more of them. That's how I like to roll. All right. So I'm going to do about 6 on this piece right here. Okay, see, I'm pretty even. Okay, if you feel like one is a little too light in filling or has too much, this is it's really easy to just adjust it as you need. Now I'm going to take this pastry brush. Okay, is it a paintbrush? Heck yeah it is, but I only use it in the kitchen. Right? I recommend you get a pastry brush for yourself. They're so versatile and useful. Okay, so I'm just going to take this egg wash and I'm going to brush around my filling. Okay, right in between. Right, and this is what's going to seal my pasta nicely. Okay. That way it won't bust open once I put it in the water. Okay, so I'm going to take the sheet and just drop it right on top. Okay, I want to make sure it covers all of my pasta. And I want to go around and tap my fingers very gently around the filling, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to get all the air out closest to the filling. Right? That's why I get a nice seal and I won't get any exploding ravioli. Right? If you end up with a little air bubble, that's okay, but just try again. Work your fingers around. Okay. And now I'm going to use our little fluted cutter here, because I like the shape that it makes. Again, you can use a pizza cutter, you can use a knife, whichever one you like. Okay? I'm just going to trim off this excess stuff, anything that doesn't look nice. Okay, and again, this is another way that you can create the size that you want. Right? If you like a lot of extra pasta around the edge, great. If you like a lot of filling, also great. I'm saving all that scrap because why the heck not? Okay? By no means does this have to be perfect or measured. All right, especially if you're just doing it for the first time. But there's a ravioli. Again, I could trim that up a little bit more if I wanted to. All right, but I kind of like these nice big flat pieces. I'm just going to put it onto our sheet pan with our semolina on it. And these actually, again, are really nice if you let them dry out room temp just for a couple minutes before you cook them off. That way, right, the egg kind of helps seals itself nicely. All right. Beauty. I'm going to do one more sheet. I'll do one more shape for you. This one we're going to call, or it is called, fagottini, which means a bundle. Right, it's a pyramid shape. All right, so I'm just going to roll this out now, just like I did before. I've got my pasta sheet nice and rolled out, nice and thin. I'm going to show you a fagottini. All right, so I'm just going to, again, square off my edges. I'm also going to make kind of more manageable squares here. I definitely want a square, as much of a square as I can make. All right, I'm eyeballing. If I was doing this for a restaurant or something, I would probably measure. Okay, but we're freehanding it today. I'm just going to lay my sheets out right there. Could be a big one. And this guy, maybe I'll make a ravioli out of him, just because he's a little tapered. All right, that's part of the reason you want to make sure that you kind of square off your pasta as well as you can. You're always going to get those weird little doughs. All right, so again, I'm going to use our scalloped edge guy here. I'm just going to lay these out. I don't want to actually stack them on top of each other because they will start to stick after a second. So what I want to do, all right, so to make a fagotto, all right, again, a little bundle. So I'm going to take one of my squares, and I'm actually going to trim these down a little bit with my scallop cutter. That way I get that fun scalloped edge. All right. Otherwise, they do end up quite big, so I kind of cut these just a little bit too big for my liking, which is fine. All right, so now I've got my scalloped edge. All right, I'm going to do a nice dollop of ricotta filling. Yeah, that looks good. Again, you figure it out as you go. All right. The more you do it, the more you kind of know. So a little bit of egg wash around the edges. And then I'm going to go around and grab each corner and bring it towards the middle. Nice and easy, like. Try to match up those edges as much as I can. Bring it together. That one kind of failed a little bit, but that's okay. I'm not worried about it. I'm more worried about making sure I get these edges sealed. All right, and now there's my fagotto. All right, there's so many different shapes, sizes, everything that you can make. You just got to experiment a little bit. This is just one of my favorites that I like to do. And once I get going, I can kind of get it a little bit better. But there you go. There's your fagotto. So I'm going to make a few of these, and then we'll cook them off. All right, so I've got all my pasta processed now. All right, I've got my linguine. It's dried out a little bit, which is totally fine. I've got my fagotto right here. All right. They're tricky, but they are fun. All right, and I've got my ravioli here as well. So I'm going to show you how to cook these off. All right, we're going to turn the linguine into carbonara, and we'll do some fun things with the ravioli and the fagotto. All right, so while we wait for our water to boil, okay, this is just water with a little pinch of salt in there. I know that my fresh pasta has salt in it already. Right, traditionally, you would normally hit it with some good amount of salt if you were doing dry pasta, because if you look at the ingredients of dry pasta, there's absolutely no salt most of the time. So that's why you want to season your water heavily when you do dry. However, with fresh, I just want a little pinch just again to boost up the flavor a little bit. So while we wait for that, I'm going to do carbonara first. All right, so first I have 2 egg yolks. All right, just the egg yolks in a big bowl here. I've got some pecorino. This is about a 1/4 cup of grated pecorino. All right, it's very similar to Parmesan, except it's a little bit softer, maybe a little bit sharper, which is what I like. If you have Parmesan, that is totally fine. That's very traditional. It's great. I'm just going to dump it right on top of my egg yolks. Okay. I'm going to do a little pinch of salt. And I'm going to do a good amount of cracked pepper. All right, these are the key things about carbonara: is black pepper, egg yolk, and the next thing is, in this case, pancetta. Now, pancetta is a type of Italian bacon that is not smoked, and it's usually rolled. So what I did is I just took it and chopped it up, rendered it a little bit. And if you don't have pancetta, I just happened to find some. It was really inexpensive. It was great. Bacon works great. Absolutely, that's your go-to. Traditionally, it would be something called guanciale, which is the cheek of the pig that gets cured, and it's very, very fatty and very delicious. Okay, so I'm just going to put a nice little healthy pinch, couple pinches of pancetta in the bowl, right? Not going to do anything else with it right now. I'm just going to look at it. So now my water's boiling. All right. I've got my handy dandy pasta basket. So I'm just going to drop it right in there. And I'm going to grab 2 of these bundles, actually 3 of these bundles of linguine that I did. And I'm just going to drop them in to my basket. Now, fresh pasta, the beauty of fresh pasta is it really only takes about a minute to cook, if that. All right, it really depends on the size. So I'm just going to give it a shake so it loosens itself up. Okay, I have tongs here ready. All Right, so if I want to move it around, if you don't have one of these baskets, don't you worry, just let it. Right, maybe a strainer or a spider works really well, but you want to get it out of the water as soon as you can. We're not going to drain off the water. We want a little bit of that hot water, right? Because this stuff is super delicious, right? We're getting all the starches and the egg and everything that we wanted, right? That we got out of that pasta into this water. So in case this ends up feeling a little too tight, right? We can always add a little bit of pasta water. Pasta water, again, is that secret ingredient. So I'm just making sure everything's moving, loose, right? See how the color's changed? Right, now it looks a little bit more opaque. Everything's floated to the top, which is another sign that it is all the way cooked. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it, I'm going to shake off a little bit of excess water, and then just dump it straight on top of my eggs. All right, and then I'm going to move quickly to toss everything. And now that egg yolk, all right, along with that cheese that's now melting from the heat and a little bit of water, coating my pasta nicely. All right, and anybody who knows me and anybody who's taken my class knows, right? Chef, that egg yolk, we're just going to eat it raw. It's not raw, okay? It is being cooked by the heat of that water. That water is 212 degrees, all right? Egg yolks, they cooked at a much lower temperature, and if you took your food handlers, food managers, you know, eggs only need to be cooked to 145. So this is plenty of heat for it to be cooked through, okay? And that's it, guys. I can smell that bacon or that pancetta, a lot of that pepper. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and plate it up. Take some of this. Just put it right in the middle of my bowl and give it a little bit of a twist. That way it gives me a nice bit of height. This is probably 1.5 portions, but I am hungry today. Making pasta is hard work. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure I get all that bacon, all that pasta. And again, because I spent time making this pasta and making it pretty, I'm going to make sure that I wipe my bowl. And I've got a little bit of Parmesan here, just for a little extra cheesy goodness. And that's pretty much it, guys. You can do a little parsley or a little fresh herb if you want, but it's not necessarily traditional and not necessarily necessary. Just a little crack of pepper so you can see that a little bit more. And there you go. All right, guys, so now we're going to do our ravioli. Okay, I'm going to do the ravioli instead of the fagotto. I got other plans for that. I don't know what yet, but we'll see. So I've got my water again. All right, crank that up. In the meantime, I'm going to heat up and make some brown butter. All right, here I've got about 2 tablespoons of butter. Whole, cold butter, warm butter, cold butter, doesn't matter. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to melt this butter. And then I'm going to take it even further till I get some browning in it, right? A little bit of color, right? It's going to smell a little bit nutty. It's going to taste a little bit more caramely and sweet, all right? You definitely do not want to rush this. Don't crank the heat thinking, oh, I'll do it faster. Okay, you definitely want a little bit of a slow. So as soon as it melts, right, it's going to brown really fast. And once it browns, it goes burnt very quickly as well. Okay, so as soon as I get this melted, all right, I'm going to keep it moving because again, these melted bits are going to turn brown much faster than I think. All right, I also don't want a ton of butter. It depends how much you're making. All right, and while this is going, I'm going to drop my ravioli into my boiling water. All right, you want to make sure that you're ready to go on all these things. Now I'm going to swirl this butter around. Okay. You can start to see some browning already. All right, but it's not quite there yet. And my ravioli are going to cook pretty fast. Okay? I want to keep everything moving, keep everything moving. Right? And you'll start to see these little flecks of brown in your butter. And that's when you know you're ready. Okay? You don't want to go too much farther than that. Again, you'll end up bitter and burnt rather than caramely and nutty. All right. My ravioli is very close. My butter is also very close. All right, you're seeing how quickly this all comes together? I sure hope so. All right. Keeping this moving. All right, I'm definitely brown buttery. Again, you can see that. You can see these little speckles of brown right there. Yeah, that's what I want. Okay, I'm going to give it like 10 more seconds of just browning through. Right, you can even see the foam on top kind of subsiding. There was a lot when it first got melted. All right, now I'm right where I want to be. I'm going to turn off that heat. I'm going to drop in some marjoram. Okay, marjoram, it's a fresh herb. It's kind of like oregano, but a little bit more fragrant. And I just want to get that popping and oiling, right? And it fries that marjoram just a little bit, and it infuses its flavor into the butter. All right, so now my ravioli is ready. I'm going to turn off my heat. Again, I'm just going to shake off the excess water and go right into my butter. All right, and then I want to do a quick, coating of it. All right, and instead of doing a classic sauce, tomato or cream or Alfredo, this is my sauce. All right, I get these beautiful brown speckles everywhere. So now I'm going to plate. All right, so I've got my plate right here. I'm just going to take these beautiful ravioli, and I'm going to try and place them on here as nice as I can. All right, we spent a lot of time making it. All right, showcase that speckly brown butter. I don't necessarily want to throw all this butter in here, but I want some, and I definitely want some of that herb. All right, do a little drizzle around the edge. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to make sure again, clean my rim. Okay, I want some of that butter to show, so you know it's brown butter. And again, I'm just doing a little bit of parm on top, because why the heck not? Melts right in. And that's it. That's all you need. This is great for fall right now. Okay, sage is really popular to do on top. Any type of fresh herb that's going to pop and infuse with your butter is going to be great for sure. All right, and there you have it. All right, all. So I hope you enjoyed our first video about how to make pasta. Hopefully we'll make more of these, and you'll get to learn some new fun techniques building off of the stuff you've already learned here at Silver Fork. I'm going to eat this pasta. It smells amazing. It looks amazing. And I'm very hungry. I worked very hard for it. So I hope you have a good day. Enjoy your pasta, and I'll see you next time.